I sat in the back of Class 7 at Swang First High School, staring out the window. My teacher was droning on about the college entrance exams, telling us we only had 3 months left. She called it a mountain road in the clouds, urging us to think about our futures. But my mind was miles away. To my classmates, I was just Lee Kaji, a quiet student from a struggling family. They didn't know the truth. They didn't know I had to cheat. I looked at Su Hong, our class monitor. She was the ice queen of the school, fierce and talented. Most guys were terrified of her, but I just saw a girl trying too hard. My family situation was a mess. My father had been injured in a fight just last month. Money was tight, and the pressure was mounting. In this world, strength was everything. Suddenly, a memory flashed through my mind, sharp as a blade. I wasn't just a high schooler. In my head, I carried the experiences of someone who had lived 20 years in a world of martial arts and cultivation. I remembered the vast oceans, the legendary masters, and the great thousand races that threatened our very existence. To everyone else, I was a nobody. To me, they were all just frogs at the bottom of a well. Senior brother Su Huangyang. How much further? A voice seemed to echo in my mind. I blinked, coming back to reality. My classmate Chen Lin was standing next to me, looking out at the massive skyscraper in the distance. That building was the center of power in our city, a place where resources were hoarded and futures were decided. People said the Prince of Shu was training there, practicing a sword technique so powerful it could summon lightning. The rumors said he had been struck by 30,000 bolts of heavenly energy and survived. "What are you looking at, senior brother?" Chen Lin asked, using a playful nickname. I didn't answer. I was looking at the hidden patterns of the world. I saw the blood-toad demon lurking in the shadows of the city's underbelly, a creature that most people ignored until it was too late. I saw the corruption in the martial arts schools and the fake masters who traded lives for pills. My teacher, Su Hong, walked over to my desk. She looked at me with those cold, sharp eyes. She probably thought I was daydreaming again, another failure in the making. She had no idea that I had already mastered the basic breathing techniques she was trying to teach. I had even started working on the steel bone technique, something that should have been impossible for a student my age. "Li Kaji, pay attention," she snapped. I nodded silently. I didn't want to stand out yet. The world was changing, and the Zhu Tian seeds of power were falling from the sky like invisible rain. Most people would miss them. I wouldn't. I felt a warmth in my palm, a hidden resource that only I could sense. It was a copper pill, a remnant from my past life's knowledge. To a normal person, it was trash. To me, it was the key to breaking through my limits. The bell rang, signaling the end of the day. It was 8 p.m., and the sky was dark. As my classmates rushed out to grab snacks or head to cram school, I stayed behind for a moment. I looked at my hands. They were trembling, not from fear, but from excitement. "You guys don't know a damn thing," I whispered to the empty room. I headed toward the exit, but as I passed the school's training hall, I heard a commotion. A group of students was gathered around a younger girl, my junior sister from the local martial arts club. They were pushing her around, laughing. I felt a coldness settle in my chest. I had spent years hiding, waiting for the right moment. But seeing them bully someone who couldn't fight back? That wasn't part of the plan. I walked toward them, my footsteps heavy and deliberate. "Let her go," I said. The leader of the group turned around, a sneer on his face. He was a rich kid who thought his family's money made him a master. He didn't realize that in my eyes, he was already a dead man. I had lived through wars and faced demons. A high school bully was nothing. I took a step forward, my left foot leading the way. The air around me seemed to grow heavy. I wasn't just Li Kaji anymore. I was a predator waking up. I had been in this world for a while now, and I was tired of playing the victim. It was time to show them what a real master looked like. After all, I had a cheat, and they didn't. The next morning, the world felt different. My body was sore, but my mind was sharper than ever. I spent the early hours focused, feeling the energy flow through my palms as I pushed through my training. I headed home, slipping through the brush near my house. I wasn't ready to give up on this path. Not yet. When I reached the door, I knew what was waiting for me. My family was inside, likely already eating. I hesitated for a second, then pushed the door open. My uncle, Gu, looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot. He didn't say a word, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. He looked at me like I was a debt he couldn't pay off. "How much more money do you need?" he asked, his voice cold. I didn't answer right away. To him, I was just a burden, a kid wasting resources. He paused, looking at me like I was just another mouth to feed. He and the others continued eating as if I were a ghost. I turned and walked toward my room, but my father, Su Guoming, stopped me. "How are you going to find a way?" he muttered, looking at me with a mix of pity and frustration. "Why are you even back? We're in a critical period. What's your excuse this time?" I looked at the meager food on the table. It was pathetic. I gave a small, tight smile and walked past them. I could hear my senior brother, Bai Feiyu, out on the street. He was loud, confident, and always acted like he owned the road. Then, a softer voice drifted in from behind him. I knew that voice. It was a girl I had seen around, someone who always seemed to notice things others missed. I went to my room and checked my savings. I had barely anything left, maybe a few thousand. In this era, that was nothing. I wasn't some little white face who could live off others. I needed to grow, and I needed to do it fast. "It's just a coincidence," I whispered to myself, thinking about the medicine I needed. I decided to save the money. It wasn't like the medicine would fix everything anyway. Besides, the little girl next door, Xiao Mao, needed her own medicine. I felt a strange sense of responsibility for her. She was always watching me with those big, curious eyes. I needed a job. I needed to supplement my income. I thought about the needlework factory nearby, but they didn't have enough openings. I felt useless for a moment until I heard Xiao Mao's voice. "I saw you at the hot springs," she chirped. I sighed, not in the mood for her games. "Go take your medicine, kid." Despite my rough exterior, I knew people saw me differently now. I was young, sharp, and I had a presence that wasn't there before. Every time I saw Bai Feiyu in his martial arts uniform, I felt a flicker of something. Maybe rivalry, maybe just the drive to surpass him. He was my senior, but in my heart, I knew I was catching up. I was 300 meters ahead in my mind, even if my body hadn't reached that peak yet. I pushed open the door to the training area, taking off my headphones. The sound of bells and drums echoed in the distance. I saw the Monkey King of our local group sitting on a sofa, looking like he was floating above the world. Xiao Mao was there too, her eyes wide as she stared at him. "So handsome," she whispered, her eyes sparkling. I walked over, feeling like an intruder in their little world. The Monkey King looked at me, a practiced smile on his face. Xiao Mao's face went red, her chubby cheeks flushing as she looked between us. She actually wiped a bit of drool from her lip. "This is my husband," she joked, pointing at the handsome senior. "Don't try to steal him from me." I just smiled back. I didn't have time for jealousy. I had to focus on my cultivation. I needed 60,000 credits to really get where I wanted to go. It sounded like a fortune. I looked at the room around me. It felt clear, no longer a blurry dream. My senior brother, Lin Shimin, walked in then. He was part of the elite, the kind of guy who could fly if he wanted to. He looked at me, his brow furrowing as he sensed the change in me. It was like I had a progress bar over my head that only I could see, but he could feel the weight of it. "I'm going to the stage," I said, my voice steady. Lin Shimin started to say something, but I moved fast, covering his mouth before he could reveal too much in front of the others. I leaned into his ear, whispering so only he could hear. "I know what I'm doing. My cultivation is getting faster. I don't need the fake cycles anymore." He looked at me, stunned. He reached out to pat my shoulder, but I swiped his hand away. I wasn't a child anymore. I was a fighter. "I'm just practicing for them," I said, nodding toward the younger kids. Su Xiaohai, another junior, looked at me with respect. I wanted to help my family, to change our situation, and my current strength, the level of an 8th grade blade master, was finally starting to mean something. My heart pounded. For the first time, I felt like I was in control. "Why are you resting?" I teased Xiaohai. "Even Xiao Mao is faster than you now." He pouted. "I can't beat her." But he didn't see what I saw. Suddenly, a sound echoed through the air. Bells, high-pitched and piercing. They rang over and over, a rhythmic chime that seemed to vibrate in my very soul. Ring, ring, ring. The sound didn't stop. It was the sound of a system awakening. I felt my connection to the world shift. I was 18 years old, standing in the shadow of the Marshall University, But something inside me had changed. A screen flickered in my mind, showing stats and skills I shouldn't have possessed. Spatial slash, I whispered to myself. The system showed a progress bar. 30%, 60%, it was climbing fast. I realized my cultivation was different from everyone else's. While they spent years grinding, sweating, and bleeding for a single breakthrough, I had something better. I had an idle system. I could gain experience just by existing. The numbers ticked up, millions of points flooding into my consciousness. I was gaining strength by the second. I looked at my hands. I could feel the true chi swirling under my skin, thick and potent. It wasn't just energy, it was power. I was at the bone-breaking stage, but my foundation was deeper than anyone could imagine. The great sage scripture was working through me, refining every muscle and every marrow. The night grew dark, but I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I spent the hours practicing, feeling my heart thumping against my ribs like a war drum. It was a strange, intoxicating sensation. I was evolving into something beyond human. By the time the sun began to peek over the horizon, I was a different man. I looked at the mountain path where Ouyang's carriage had passed earlier. They thought I was a waste. They thought I was just a shadow following my brothers. I stood up, my movements fluid and dangerous. My true chi was no longer a mess of unrefined energy. It was a sharp, focused blade. I had reached a level most people only dreamed of, and I had done it while they were sleeping. I looked out at the Qingyun sect, the vast expanse of the martial world stretching out before me. They didn't know I was coming. They didn't know that the waste of the family was now the most dangerous person on the mountain. I took a deep breath, the cold morning air filling my lungs. The grind was over. Now, the real fight began. The night was thick, and the silence of the mountain was heavy, but my body felt like a coiled spring. I looked at the railing of the balcony. In my mind, I saw myself stepping onto a flying sword, soaring toward a future no one expected. My sword skills weren't just for show anymore. They were a force that could cut through the dark. I changed into an old Taoist robe. It was worn and simple, the kind of clothing that made me look like just another face in the crowd. I needed to move without being noticed. I took a few deep breaths, feeling the cool air settle in my lungs. My true chi was steady now. It was time to head out. As I moved toward the edge of the mountain, I saw a movement. Down the slope, near the foot of the hills, red lanterns flickered. It was the Ouyang family. They were making a scene, setting off fireworks and shouting as if they already owned the place. They were talking big, bragging about their status and their plans for the sect. I watched them from the shadows, their arrogance fueling my resolve. They thought they were the main characters of this story. They were wrong. I moved with the grace of a predator. Every step was silent, my body light as a feather. I reached the entrance of the mountain gate, where the new disciples were gathered. "Are you looking for the second-year dorms?" I asked, my voice low. She jumped, startled by my sudden appearance. I didn't stay to chat. I had a different destination. I headed toward the testing area, a place where the sect measured the strength of its disciples. There was a row of stone pillars and training dummies, used to gauge the impact of a warrior's strike. I saw a figure standing near one of the dummies. It was a senior brother, but something was off about him. He stood perfectly still, his breath shallow, almost non-existent. When I looked at his face, I realized I couldn't remember what he looked like even while I was staring right at him. He felt less like a man and more like a puppet. I didn't care. I needed to know where I stood. I stepped up to the testing pillar. My mind flashed back to the King Kong punch, a technique I had mastered through the system. I didn't need a fancy stance. I just needed to strike. I felt the power surge from my feet, through my core, and into my fist. I didn't hold back. I let my true chi explode at the point of impact. The sound was like a thunderclap echoing through the valley. The pillar groaned under the force. I looked at the display. The reading was off the charts for someone at my supposed level. I had reached the peak of the bone-breaking stage, touching the very edge of the next realm. "Who's making that noise at this hour?" a voice shouted from the dorms. I didn't wait around to be caught. I melted back into the darkness, my heart pounding with a mix of adrenaline and satisfaction. The Ouyang family could have their fireworks and their fame. I had something better. I had the strength to crush them when the time was right. By the time I made it back to my room, the sun was just starting to crest the horizon. I sat on my thin mat, my breathing finally evening out. I had tested my limits and found they were much higher than I thought. The waste of the family was gone. In his place was a man who could shake the foundations of the Chinyan sect. I closed my eyes for a brief moment of rest, knowing that when I woke up, the world would have no choice but to notice me. My third senior brother was a man of hidden depths, a person who carried an aura that made others uneasy. I knew the path ahead was dangerous, but I didn't feel the fear I should have. People said it was impossible for me to progress, that I was stuck, but they didn't see what I saw. I had already mastered 10 transformations while they were still struggling with basic moves. High up in a tree, Bai Feiyu watched me. He was hidden in the shadows, his eyes fixed on my every move. I could tell his heart was racing. To him, my combat power was an anomaly, something that shouldn't exist at my level. He looked at the testing pillar, then back at me, wondering if I was even human. Li Qingshan tried to play it cool. He kept insisting that the medicine I took was ordinary, a failed batch that shouldn't have given me any edge. He was jealous. I could see it in the way he gritted his teeth. He didn't want to believe that a waste, like me, could surpass him. He muttered that even if I took 100 more pills, I'd still be nothing. He was lying to himself, and we both knew it. Bai Feiyu's voice drifted down from the branches. He didn't want to cause a scene, especially not with the martial arts competition looming. He looked at me like I was a wild wolf that had just broken its chains. For the first time, this genius from a prestigious family felt a genuine sense of pressure from a mere servant, like me. The atmosphere grew heavy. I noticed Li Qingshan staring at the testing area. Was he planning to sneak in and test his own strength? I smiled inwardly. "You're making quite a disturbance," a voice cut through the air. It was Ouyang Yen. He stepped forward, his eyes sharp. He had heard the commotion and came to investigate. He looked at the shattered remains of the testing area, and then at me. I could see the confusion in his eyes, followed by a flicker of something else, respect, or maybe fear. "I wasn't making trouble," I said, my voice steady. "Testing my strength is a good thing. But if you want to surpass the great families, you need more than just a high score on a pillar." Ouyang Yin looked at the broken tiles on the roof, then back at me. He tried to deny what he was seeing, but the evidence was right in front of him. My second senior brother, Song Jida, stepped up next. With a swift motion, he cleared the debris, his eyes never leaving mine. He was ready to push his limits too. Suddenly, a figure in black appeared. It was a young man with a cold, disciplined aura. He carried a sword that seemed to hum with its own energy. His presence changed everything. The air felt colder, sharper. "Who are you?" Ouyang Yin asked, his hand tightening on his own blade. The newcomer didn't answer right away. He just looked at me. There was a strange connection in that gaze, like two predators recognizing each other in the wild. He moved with a grace that made the rest of us look like amateurs. "I'm here for the test," the young man finally said. He didn't care about the rules or the hierarchy of the sect. He just wanted to see where he stood. He walked toward the pillar, ignoring the whispers of the crowd. I watched him, my mind racing. This world was much bigger than I thought, and there were monsters hiding in every corner. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I wasn't the only one hiding my true strength. This sect was a powder keg, and I had just lit the fuse. As the sun climbed higher, I realized that my quiet life was over. The waste of the family was gone, replaced by someone who would make them all tremble. "Be careful, Xiao Hai, Xiao Meng," I whispered to myself, thinking of those I had to protect. The path ahead is going to be bloody. I turned and walked away, my hand resting on the hilt of my blade. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew exactly where I was going, and heaven help anyone who tried to stop me. "You've got to be kidding me," Xiaoming huffed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you really going to go through with this?" I looked at her and nodded firmly. I had already decided. My path to breaking the bone-strengthening stage wasn't just about my own power anymore. I had to make sure no one could ever bully us again. The rumors about my sudden rise were already spreading through the sect like wildfire. Even the higher-ups were starting to notice. Ouyang Yin had been trying to act like he wasn't bothered, but I saw the way his hand shook when he looked at the shattered testing pillar. He knew the waste of the family was gone. "Brother, just tell me the truth," Xiaoming said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "If this gets too dangerous, we can just leave. We can go home." I looked at her innocent face and felt a pang of guilt. She didn't understand that for people like us, There was no going home. If I didn't reach the top, we would be hunted down. I'm not going anywhere, I told her. I'm staying right here to take what's mine. Li Qingshan was the one I really had to watch out for. He was clever, lurking in the shadows like a venomous snake. He had guessed that my breakthrough wasn't just luck. He was watching my every move, waiting for a moment of weakness. But I wasn't going to give him one. I headed toward the training grounds, where the atmosphere was thick with tension. The other students moved out of my way, their whispers following me like a bad smell. They were terrified and curious all at once. Is it true? One of them muttered. Did he really reach the peak of the bone-breaking stage in a single night? I ignored them. I had work to do. I ran through my forms, my fists cutting through the air with a whistle. Every strike felt heavier, faster, and more precise than the day before. The King Kong punch was flowing through my veins, vibrating with a power that felt almost alive. Suddenly, Li Qingshan appeared at the edge of the field. He wasn't alone. He had a group of lackeys with him, all looking for a fight. You think one lucky night makes you a genius, Lin Yuan? Li Qingshan sneered, stepping forward. You're still just a fluke. A mistake. I didn't stop my training. I didn't even look at him. If I'm a mistake, what does that make you? Someone who couldn't even scratch the pillar I broke. His face turned a deep shade of purple. He lunged at me, his movements fueled by pure jealousy. I saw it coming a mile away. I shifted my weight, let his fist graze my shoulder, and countered with a swift strike to his ribs. He hit the dirt hard. The silence that followed was deafening. Don't come at me again unless you're prepared to die, I said coldly. I left him there in the dust. I had bigger problems to worry about. The martial arts competition was approaching, and the Ouyang family was already making their moves. They had sent word that they wanted to reconnect with their long-lost relative. I knew what that meant. They wanted to see if I was a threat they could control or one they needed to eliminate. Later that night, I sat with Xiao Hai and Xiao Meng. I could see the fear in their eyes. The sect was becoming a powder keg, and I was the one holding the match. Listen to me, I told them, my voice low and serious. The next few days are going to be chaotic. Stay close to each other. Don't trust anyone, not even the elders. What about you? Xiao Hai asked. I'm going to finish this, I replied. I spent the rest of the night pushing my internal energy to the limit. My system was screaming, processing the transformations at a rate that would have killed a normal man. But I wasn't normal anymore. I was a predator in a den of wolves. As the sun began to rise, I stood up and looked out over the sect. The competition was about to begin. The waste was gone, and the world was finally going to see the monster they had created. I gripped my blade, my heart steady and cold. It was time to show them exactly how bloody my path could be. The second and fourth senior brothers looked so much alike it was unsettling. As I watched them, I noticed a strange similarity in their movements, a rhythm that felt identical to the longevity techniques taught throughout the school. I stood back, my eyes narrowing. No one suspected a thing. To the other students, they were just another pair of talented disciples, but I saw the truth. They weren't just practicing, they were mimicking a pattern I had seen before. It was a cold, calculated imitation. I leaned against a stone pillar, watching the geniuses of the sect parade around. They carried their swords with a pride that bordered on arrogance. I felt a wave of helplessness watching them. They didn't realize they were stuck in a loop, unable to break through to the higher levels of cultivation. They practiced the same moves season after season, year after year, like puppets following a script. I offered a faint, mocking smile. In this high-level class, no one really stood out to me. They were just filling space, living off the reputation of their names while I climbed from the shadows. Look at senior brother's son, someone whispered nearby. He's so handsome, and so talented. I ignored the chatter. The students were always obsessed with the golden boys. They didn't see the madness behind the eyes. Word was spreading that the emperor himself had sent someone to oversee the competition. Then I saw him, a man in black robes, his presence cutting through the crowd like a cold wind. He didn't say much, but his gaze was heavy. He carried a sword that looked ordinary, yet it felt like a sleeping dragon. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. 3 figures stepped forward, challenging a group of students. Gold and silver flashed in the sunlight as they clashed. It was chaos. I saw the younger students trembling, their eyes wide with fear. The teachers tried to step in, to plead for mercy, but the crowd was frozen. No one could look away. The man in the black robe watched with a cruel intensity. He wasn't looking for a fair fight. He was looking for a slaughter. "This is your chance," a voice hissed in my ear. It was one of the elders. Years ago, a legendary treasure was lost. Some say it's hidden within the sect's foundations. "Do you really think your senior brother is who he says he is?" I didn't answer. I didn't care about their conspiracies. My focus was on the energy swirling in the air. It felt like thunder was about to erupt. The Emperor's men were moving, trying to secure their position before the real fight began. The geniuses were just idols for the masses to worship, but I knew how easily idols could be broken. I walked toward the small mountain clearing where the air felt thickest. I saw Ouyang Chunlin standing there, his brow furrowed in concentration. He looked like a statue, frozen in a moment of realization. Then, the ground beneath us groaned. It felt like a massive beast was waking up inside the earth. The students around us began to panic, looking left and right, sensing the shift in the spiritual veins of the mountain. I stood my ground as the wind picked up, whipping my hair across my face. Liwen wasn't here to help. He had his own demons to fight. I reached out, feeling the energy of the trees and the very bricks beneath my feet. Everything felt ancient, heavy with the weight of centuries. This wasn't just a competition anymore. It was a ritual. I saw two figures clashing in the distance, their movements so fast they were a blur. They were both at the Golden Core stage, but their power was on a different level. Every strike sent shockwaves through the air, making the surrounding buildings tremble. The ordinary students watched in horror. "They're both at the Golden Core stage," one boy stammered, his face pale. "But why does it feel so different from mine?" He was right. Their power wasn't just cultivation. It was raw, violent intent. I watched as one of them threw a punch that cracked the protective barrier around the arena. The shockwave hit the crowd, sending people tumbling. I didn't move. I watched the way the energy flowed, the way the black-yellow chi swirled around them. It was a power that shouldn't exist in a place like this. I felt a surge of anger. These people played with power like it was a toy, unaware of the destruction they were inviting. I gripped my fists, my own internal energy roaring in response. My system was vibrating, recording every move, every shift in the air. I saw the path forward now. It wasn't about being a genius. It was about surviving the storm they were creating. The waste they once mocked was standing right in the center of their apocalypse. I looked at the mountain, at the hidden masters watching from the peaks, and I knew. My time was coming. I didn't need their titles or their praise. I just needed to be the last one standing when the dust settled. The path was bloody, but I was already halfway down it. The mountains felt heavy, their peaks hidden in a shroud of mist that seemed to swallow the very air. I stood in the desolate ruins of the old cave dwellings, a place where Chun Tao and the others had spent their worst days. My luck had been rotten lately. My mind was scattered, and my eyes burned with a frustration I couldn't shake. The river in front of me roared, its power grinding against the rocks, mirroring the turmoil inside my chest. My shoes were worn thin, barely holding together, but I didn't let that stop me. I thought of Li Qingshan. The past few days had been a blur of preparation. While everyone else looked toward the geniuses like Bai Feiyu, I was focused on the reality of our shortage. The Heavenly Heart rotation was the only way to move forward, but it required a level of control I was still fighting to master. I watched Ouyang Yan. She stood there, cold and indifferent to the two men who had just been crushed by her family's power. She didn't care that they were dead. She just stood there, her presence like a weight on the air. Anyone who dared to speak out was silenced by a single look. I continued my cultivation in secret, ignoring the noise of the ordinary students. They were busy with chores and petty dramas, unaware that the world was shifting beneath their feet. Yesterday, I had climbed the mountain alone. I remembered the path. Every twist and turn burned into my memory. I didn't need a flashlight. I relied on my instincts. To reach the top wasn't hard, but to do it without being noticed required everything I had. I saw the hidden guards, their movements stiff but precise. If I used my palm strike correctly, I could slip past them. If not, I was dead. Suddenly, I saw a figure ahead. It was the one they called the Relentless Soul. He moved as if he were stepping through the earth itself, his eyes scanning the nearby clearing. I saw Xiao Tai nearby, frantically packing his things. He looked small, broken. I wondered if he thought I was a fool, a waste like everyone else said. I gripped the handle of my shovel, hiding in the shadows of the old building where Ouyang's family stored their secrets. I watched the relentless soul move. He didn't even look at the weaklings. To him, they were already ghosts. I focused my vision, using the system to track the energy swirling around him. It was organized into 21 distinct rotations. My legs felt heavy, like lead, but I forced myself to stay still. In the distance, I heard a strange cry. It was Li Qingshan. He was trapped, surrounded by the line of continuous peaks technique. The moves were calculated, sealing off every exit. "You old fox," someone shouted. The sword energy shifted, turning toward the safety stairs. But there was no escape. They were pinned in the third basement level. I found a way through. It was an old security door, hidden in a far corner of the mountain. To anyone else, it was a dead end. But to me, it was the soul of the formation. I opened it easily. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old paper and stagnant energy. This was the hidden chamber of the Li family. I saw Xiao Hai. He had been beaten, left in a new clearing near the base of the mountain. He couldn't even stand. My heart twisted, but I couldn't go to him yet. I had to find the weapon. I moved toward a massive stone sword, 10,000 pounds of solid rock blocking the path. I threw my weight against it, channeling every bit of my internal strength. The stone groaned and slid aside, revealing a hidden space. Inside, I found a bookshelf. It wasn't filled with ordinary manuals. These were the sacred texts of the Li family, marked in deep, blood-red ink. I scanned the titles until my eyes landed on one that made my blood run cold. It was a technique I had heard of in my past life, something that shouldn't exist here. Ouyang Yin had always warned me to stay away from these evil arts, calling them the path of a madman. But as I looked at the diagrams, I saw the truth. It wasn't evil, it was just power they couldn't control. The drawings were ancient, depicting stars and needles, a map of the human soul. "Are you really going to do this?" a voice in my head whispered. I didn't hesitate. I thought of the way Li Qingshan had looked at me, the way the sect treated anyone who wasn't born with a silver spoon. My brain was firing at 1,000 miles an hour, processing the movements. I started to practice right there in the dark, my body creating blurred afterimages. It was the vanishing star step, a technique that allowed one to move between breaths. I felt a surge of power. My memory of my previous life merged with the martial logic of this world. I wasn't just a student anymore. I was a storm waiting to break. I looked at my hands, now glowing with a faint, predatory light. The path ahead was bloody, and the Ouyang family was standing right in my way. I took a deep breath, the cold air filling my lungs, and stepped back into the light. The hunt had officially begun. I scanned the marginal notes in the ancient book, my eyes darting across the pages. I saw the names Chun Lei and others etched into the history of these techniques. Each page I turned felt like a step deeper into a forbidden world. I wasn't just reading. I was absorbing the legacy of those who came before me. I quickly memorized the sacred patterns, the diagrams of the 2 trigrams, and the flow of energy required to master them. As I walked along the mountain path, I spotted Ouyang Yin ahead. I didn't hesitate. I tossed the manual toward him with a casual flick of my wrist. He caught it, his expression shifting from confusion to sheer shock. Beside him, Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed, his jaw tightening as he tried to mask his jealousy. Ouyang Yin looked at me, his gaze heavy and cold. He could feel the domineering aura radiating from my body. I wasn't the waste he remembered. I was a predator in the making. Later, back at our living quarters, the atmosphere was lighter, but the tension remained beneath the surface. I sat there eating braised pork, my mind racing. My eldest senior brother looked at me and chuckled. "Junior brother, you have such a devious smile on your face right now," he teased. I just kept eating my braised duck, ignoring the comment. My focus was elsewhere. I thought about the power hidden within the Longyan formation and the secrets Li Qingshan was trying to hoard. But I knew the truth. The mountains and rivers of this sect were about to witness a storm. I felt a fire burning in my chest, a desire to trample over those who looked down on me. I wanted to turn their world into a scorched battlefield. My blade was ready. I wasn't just surviving, I was hunting. I slipped back into the hidden library, my heart hammering against my ribs. I found a secret compartment behind the shelf. Inside lay a truth that made my blood run cold. An old master had left behind the records of the unending three-way fist and the frozen sand technique. These weren't just manuals. They were the keys to a power the Qingyun sect had tried to bury. I realized that my predecessor, the original owner of this body, might have been a genius after all. I needed answers. I needed to know why the air in Qingyun Mountain felt so different lately. I opened my system interface while I ate, my fingers flying across the holographic screen. It confirmed my suspicions. Han Xingyu and the Qingyun sect were planning something big, a joint operation. This wasn't just about a martial arts competition anymore. It was about total control. I turned to my eldest senior brother. Have you ever seen a truly great cultivator in the sword-handle abyss? I asked, my voice low. He paused, his expression turning serious. He told me about the legends, the ones who left no trace behind. I realized then that if I encountered someone like that, I couldn't afford to be nervous. I needed to be faster. I needed to be more ruthless. That night, I ventured into the underground chambers. I had heard rumors of a hidden battle taking place beneath the sect, a place where the real power was decided. As I moved through the shadows, I found the entrance. The air was thick with the scent of old iron and damp earth. I reached a clearing and saw it, the second gift left for me. My eyes widened as I processed what was in front of me. Even though Li Qingshan had tried to strip this place bare, he missed the most important part. Tucked away in a reinforced crate were 30,000 spirit stones. They were neatly packed, shimmering with a faint, rhythmic light. And that wasn't all. There were 2 masterwork swords and a rare jade pendant. At the very least, this haul was worth 60,000 stones, not counting the medicinal pills. I stood in the darkness, a grin spreading across my face. Tomorrow was the big day. I had a choice to make. The system chimed in my ear, offering a new option, Guardian Mode. If I chose this path, I would have to take on every single challenger. It was a winner-take-all gamble. If I won, the final prize money would double. If I lost even once, I would walk away with absolutely nothing. I looked at the names on the tournament bracket, then back at my glowing hands. I didn't come here to play it safe. I came here to take everything. I blinked, confirming the selection in my mind. The hunt was no longer a secret. It was time to show them exactly what a waste could do. I looked at the system screen, the words blurring as my heart raced. The Guardian Mode was active, and there was no turning back. I had to decide which path to take, but the choice was already made in my blood. I didn't care about the risk. I wanted to see what these so-called geniuses were made of. The atmosphere in the sect shifted overnight. The air felt heavy, charged with an electric tension that signaled the start of the great tournament. I stood in my room, staring at my reflection. I wasn't the waste anymore. I was a storm waiting to break. I changed into my combat robes, feeling the weight of the spirit stones and the new weapons I'd recovered. I felt a surge of confidence. I was ready to ruin everyone's expectations. As I stepped toward the arena, I heard the roar of the crowd. It was deafening. Thousands of disciples and spectators had gathered, lining the paths like a sea of faces. The tournament bracket was a complex web of names, a map of the power struggles within the Qingyun sect. I saw the lines crossing, leading toward the final showdown. Every name on that list was a stepping stone for me. Suddenly, a shadow loomed overhead. I looked up and saw a massive, three-headed bird soaring through the clouds. It looked fierce, its feathers shimmering like polished steel. It was a high-level spirit beast, a mount belonging to one of the elite guests. Below it, the arena was filled with strange sights. Some disciples carried mechanical weapons, while others wore vibrant red robes that stood out against the gray stone. I moved through the crowd, catching snippets of conversation. People were talking about their favorites. They mentioned Su Hong, a swordsman known for his lethal precision, and Ouyang Shan, whose power was said to be like a mountain. They didn't mention me. To them, I was just a background character, a filler for the early rounds. I smiled to myself. That was their first mistake. I reached the staging area and saw a man wearing a white tiger mask. He stood near the center, surrounded by a faint, humming aura. He was one of the top seeds from the Chang'an region, a place known for producing monsters. Beside him stood Ouyang Yan, his beard bristling as he surveyed the competitors. The stakes were higher than I realized. If the Ouyang family lost their grip today, the entire power structure of the region would crumble. "Listen up," a voice boomed across the square. It was the head referee, a burly man with a face like weathered stone. "The rules are simple. Win and move on. Lose and you're out. But remember, this is a test of spirit as much as strength. Do not bring shame to your ancestors." I watched as the first few matches began. The violence was immediate. Blades clashed, and bursts of chi exploded in the air, sending shockwaves through the stands. I saw a disciple get kicked off the platform so hard he left a dent in the stone wall. The crowd went wild. This wasn't just a sport, it was a slaughterhouse. Then, my name was called. I stepped onto the stage, and the chatter died down. I could feel the eyes of Li Qingshan and Ouyang Yin on me. They were waiting for me to fail. My opponent was a tall, muscular man who looked at me with pure disdain. He didn't even draw his weapon. He thought he could finish me with his bare hands. "I heard you were a waste," he sneered, cracking his knuckles. "I'll make this quick so you don't suffer too much." I didn't say a word. I just breathed, feeling the King Kong punch technique stirring in my marrow. My chi flowed like a river of molten lead, heavy and unstoppable. As he lunged at me, his movements seemed slow, telegraphed by his own arrogance. I shifted my weight and struck. The sound of the impact was like a thunderclap. My fist met his chest, and for a split second, time seemed to stop. Then he was gone. He flew backward, crashing through the wooden railings and landing in the dirt 20 feet away. He didn't get up. The silence that followed was beautiful. I looked up at the VIP balcony, meeting Ouyang Yan's stunned gaze. I wasn't just participating anymore. I was taking over. The Guardian mode was just beginning, and I had a long list of names to cross off. One down, dozens to go. I was the hidden threat they feared, and now, I was their nightmare. The crowd was still buzzing from my last fight, but the atmosphere shifted the moment Su Hong stepped onto the stage. Ouyang Yin frowned, his eyes narrowing as he watched the newcomer. Beside him, Li Qingshan looked like he had a fire lit under him, restless and agitated. They were focused on a man wearing a white mask, a mysterious figure who seemed to radiate a cold, calculated aura. Su Hong didn't look like much at first glance. He was thin, almost frail, but he moved with a terrifying fluid speed. He summoned a water dragon technique that spiraled around him, the blue energy shimmering with lethal intent. Most people thought it was just a flashy show, a trick to hide a lack of real power. They were wrong. I could see the truth. That water dragon wasn't just for show. It was a concentrated mass of chi, honed to a perfect, sharp edge. The fight began in a blur. Su Hong's opponent, a brute named Hututu, lunged forward with a heavy iron blade. He was a powerhouse, the kind of fighter who relied on crushing bones and sheer momentum. But Su Hong didn't clash with him head-on. He danced. It was like watching a waltz in the middle of a storm. Hututu swung his blade, a massive horizontal arc meant to cleave a man in two. Su Hong simply leaned back, the metal whistling inches from his throat. Before the brute could recover, Su Hong struck. It wasn't a punch or a kick. He used the basic introductory techniques of the sect, moves that every disciple learned on their first day. But in his hands, those basic moves were transformed. He found the gaps in Hututu's defense with surgical precision. A palm to the chest, a finger to the throat, a quick strike to the knee. It was a systematic dismantling. The audience went from cheering for the underdog to a horrified silence. Hututu, a man twice Su Hong's size, was being picked apart. Then came the finish. Su Hong's hand moved faster than the eye could follow. He gripped Hututu's arm, twisted, and the sound of snapping bone echoed through the arena. He didn't stop there. With a casual flick of his wrist, he sent the brute crashing into the dirt. Hututu lay there, blood pooling around him, his brain rattled and his spirit broken. "Shameless," someone screamed from the stands. "He's using lethal force in a sect competition." The crowd erupted in anger. They called him a murderer, a freak who enjoyed the slaughter. Li Qingshan watched with a dark expression, his hands clenched into fists. He had planned to use his own puppets to weed out the competition, but Su Hong was a wild card he hadn't accounted for. I stood in the shadows, watching Su Hong walk off the stage. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't care about their insults. He just looked at his hands, as if he were checking for a speck of dust. He was dangerous. Very dangerous. Next match, the referee shouted, his voice trembling slightly. I looked at the bracket. My next opponent was Lin Ping, one of Li Qingshan's loyal dogs. Lin Ping was a body refining expert, known for his iron-like muscles and relentless aggression. He walked onto the stage, spitting on the ground as he looked at me. You got lucky last time, waste, Lin Ping growled. But your luck ends here. I'm going to turn your bones into powder. I didn't answer. I just stepped onto the platform, feeling the weight of the moment. The system in my mind flickered, showing me his weaknesses. He was all power, no finesse. He thought his iron skin could protect him from everything. As the signal to start rang out, Lin Ping charged. He was like a runaway carriage, his footsteps shaking the stone tiles. I stood my ground, my chi sinking low into my dantian. I didn't need a weapon. My body was the weapon. He threw a massive hook, his fist glowing with a dull metallic sheen. I slipped under it, the wind of the punch ruffling my hair. I stepped into his guard, my elbow connecting with his ribs. The sound was like a hammer hitting an anvil. He gasped, his breath hitching, but he tried to grab me. I was already gone. I moved behind him, my fingers striking the pressure points along his spine. He stiffened, his muscles locking up. I didn't give him a second to breathe. I unleashed a flurry of strikes, each one landing with the force of a battering ram. Lin Ping tried to scream, but no sound came out. I finished it with a single, straight punch to his solar plexus. The impact sent him skidding across the stage, his body limp before he even hit the ground. I looked up at the VIP section again. Ouyang Yin was no longer just stunned. He was afraid. He saw what I was doing. I wasn't just winning, I was dominating. The waste they had stepped on for years was now standing over their best warriors. I walked off the stage, my heart steady. I had a list of names, and Lin Ping was just another one crossed off. The real battle was coming, and I was ready to burn everything down to reach the top. My strength had reached a point where every movement felt explosive. I stood on the stage, waiting, but no one dared to step up. The referee, a man with a face as stiff as weathered wood, looked around the arena. His eyes finally settled on a strange figure approaching the stage. It was a beast of a man, looking more like a wild boar than a human, his skin thick and scarred. "Senior brother, is that really a slave?" A voice whispered from the sidelines. "He's so ugly." I glanced over. It was Wu Tutu, looking at the newcomer with a mix of disgust and curiosity. Next to him, Ouyang Qingshan remained silent. The air grew heavy. This new challenger wasn't just some random fighter. He was a walking mountain of muscle and hidden malice. I felt a slight twitch at the corner of my mouth. I had already sensed two powerful auras watching me from the shadows. The atmosphere in the arena shifted as the betting stalls began to roar. The odds were shifting wildly. People were shouting, throwing their money down, desperate to see if the waste of the Ouyang family would finally be crushed. "Li Qingshan, this is your prize money," someone shouted. 10,000 taels. Do you really think you can keep it?" Ouyang Yin stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He looked at the beast man on the stage and then back at me. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He wanted me dead, but he wanted to stay clean while it happened. "Don't think you've won just because you beat a few weaklings," Ouyang Yin said, his voice cold. "The real test starts now." I didn't answer him. My eyes were fixed on the monster in front of me. The man, if you could call him that, was named Ho Tian. He lay sprawled on a stone bench for a moment before rising, his movements sluggish but heavy with intent. He wasn't pretending. He was a true martial madman. As he stepped onto the platform, the ground seemed to groan under his weight. I realized then that he wasn't just using brute force. He was suppressing his chi, keeping it coiled like a spring. He was a high-level officer in the martial ranks, a man who had survived 1,000 storms. "My God," someone in the crowd gasped. "He's not just a fighter. He's a commander." I remembered the stories of the storm riders, warriors who could stand against the wind and never break. This man was one of them. He wasn't here for a fair fight. He was here to execute a sentence. The referee signaled the start. The beast man, this Sang Shan, didn't move at first. He just stared at me with eyes that had seen too much blood. Around us, the soldiers of the Ouyang family began to encircle the stage. They were the 13th Mountain Guard, the elite of the elite. Ouyang Yin is waiting for you, Sangshan grunted, his voice sounding like grinding stones. You shouldn't have opened your eyes, kid. You should have stayed a waste. I felt a surge of cold fury. I looked at the soldiers, then at the beast man, and finally at Ouyang Yin sitting in the VIP section. They thought they had me trapped. They thought a few elite guards and a mountain of meat could stop my rise. Senior brother, he's so ugly, but he's almost cute in a weird way. Wu Tudu chirped, trying to break the tension. Can we take him back to the mountain as a pet? Shut up and get back. Li Qingshan snapped, his eyes wide with genuine fear. I ignored the chatter. I focused on the way Sangshan breathed. He was a genius of slaughter, a man who had reached the peak of the bone-breaking stage just like me. But there was a difference. He fought for a master. I fought for my life. I took a deep breath, feeling the King Kong punch technique vibrating in my marrow. The pressure from his aura was immense, like a physical weight pressing down on my shoulders. I realized he was using a secret technique to suppress my cultivation. But I wasn't just a martial artist anymore. I was a survivor. I looked him dead in the eye. You talk too much for a dead man. Suddenly, I moved. I didn't wait for him to charge. I became a blur of motion, my feet cracking the stone tiles as I launched myself forward. I saw the surprise in his eyes. He didn't expect the waist to strike first. My fist glowed with a golden light, the true chi within me roaring like a dragon. This wasn't just a match. This was the moment I would show the entire Qingyun sect that the old Lin Yuan was gone. The man standing here now was someone they should fear. I felt the air ripple as our auras collided. The real battle had finally begun, and I was going to make sure every single one of them remembered my name. I didn't wait for Sangshan to react. I made my decision instantly. The air around us seemed to freeze as I launched myself forward. I didn't care about the gasps from the crowd or the shocked look on Li Qingshan's face. To me, the world had narrowed down to a single point, the target in front of me. I moved with a precision that defied logic, my body flowing like a shadow. I wasn't just using brute force. I was using every ounce of technique I had mastered. My fist, glowing with that intense golden light, felt like a steel spike ready to be driven home. I could feel the true chi roaring through my veins, a violent tide that demanded release. This was the declaration of my existence. I saw the confusion in Sangshan's eyes. He was a seasoned killer, but he had never seen a waist move like this. He tried to shift his weight, tried to bring up his guard, but I was already there. My strike wasn't just a punch. It was a rhythmic explosion of power. Suddenly, the scene around me blurred. I caught a glimpse of Ouyang Yin watching from the high platform, her eyes wide as she tried to process the speed of my evolution. She had seen me as a pawn, a weakling to be discarded, but now she was seeing a monster. Beside her, the elders were murmuring, their faces pale. They had come to see an execution, but they were witnessing a rebirth. Shut up, I roared internally, silencing the doubt in my own mind. I collided with Sangshan. The impact was like two mountains smashing together. The ground beneath us shattered, sending stone shards flying like shrapnel. I felt his ribs crack under my knuckles. He was strong, but my King Kong punch was relentless. I drove my weight forward, slamming another strike into his chest before he could even breathe. He coughed out a spray of crimson, his aura flickering like a dying candle. He tried to counter, his claws swiping at my face, but I parried him with a brutal efficiency. I wasn't playing a game. I was harvesting a life. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Wu Tutu and the others. They looked like they were seeing a ghost. I didn't care about their fear. I only cared about the heat in my chest and the coldness in my hands. Is this all the great Sangshan has? I mocked, my voice low and dangerous. I didn't give him a chance to answer. I gathered every bit of energy from my 10 transformations, channeling it into one final, devastating blow. The air screamed as my fist cut through the wind. I saw the shadow of death cross his face. He knew it was over. As my fist connected, a massive shockwave rippled outward, knocking back the spectators in the front row. The dust settled, and there I stood, my hand buried deep into the chest of the man who was supposed to kill me. I looked up at the platform, at the prestigious Ouyang family and the stunned disciples of Qinyan's sect. I pulled my hand back, letting his lifeless body slump to the cracked pavement. I wiped the blood from my brow, my gaze locking onto the high seats. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the hunter. And this was only the beginning of the blood I intended to spill. I stood over Sang Shan's corpse, but my eyes were already searching for the next threat. Li Qingshan was there, his face pale, hiding in the crowd like a rat. He looked at me with a mixture of terror and pure, unfiltered hatred. I knew he wanted me dead, but he was too much of a coward to step forward himself. Nearby, Wu Tutu stood with her group, looking completely shaken. Beside her was a white tiger, a beast from the snowy mountains that looked ready to pounce. Then there was Bai Feiyu. He watched me with eyes full of calculation, as if he were trying to measure the depth of my soul. These three, Li Qingshan, Wu Tutu, and Bai Feiyu, all had their own agendas. They all wanted a piece of the power I had just displayed. I ignored them and looked toward the horizon. A young girl stood in the distance. Her presence felt like a sharp blade. She carried a 3-foot chain-linked sword at her waist. She was a true genius of the Great Tang, someone whose cultivation had reached a level most could only dream of. With a flick of her wrist, her sword unsheathed itself, humming with a cold, celestial light. She didn't stay long. Within seconds, she vanished, leaving only the fading glow of the stars behind. I didn't let her departure distract me. I reached down and picked up a single blade of grass from the cracked pavement. To anyone else, it was debris. To me, it was a weapon. I channeled my energy into it until the green stem glowed with a sharp, metallic sheen. I held it like a dagger. Even a blade of grass could kill if the intent was strong enough. The Ouyang family elders were whispering on the high platform. Ouyang Yin looked like he wanted to scream, but he held his tongue. I had just jumped 6 levels in my cultivation score during that fight. It was impossible, unheard of. They suspected I had used a secret pill or a forbidden technique, but they couldn't prove a thing. I just stood there, letting the blood drip from my knuckles, mocking them with my silence. I walked away from the arena, heading toward the back mountains. The rain began to fall, heavy and cold, masking my movements. I knew Li Qingshan wouldn't let this go. He was probably already plotting with the elders to have me eliminated before the main competition. Let them come, I whispered to the wind. I found a secluded cave near the small mountain peak. I needed to stabilize my breath. I pulled out a jade bottle and swallowed a chi-restoring pill, feeling the warmth spread through my meridians. The destruction of the testing pillar and the death of Sang Shan had sent shockwaves through the Qinyan sect. I was no longer a waste. I was a monster they had failed to cage. The next morning, the sect was buzzing. I walked through the main square, and the disciples parted like the Red Sea. They were whispering about a white-faced devil who had slaughtered a senior disciple with his bare hands. I saw Li Qingshan standing near a group of inner disciples, his voice loud and arrogant as he tried to regain his status. He was claiming that my victory was a fluke, a trick of the light. If he's so brave, why is he hiding in the back hills? Li Qingshan sneered, not seeing me standing right behind him. I didn't say a word. I just let out a sliver of my killing intent. Li Qingshan froze. He turned around, his face turning a sickly shade of yellow. He tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. I stepped past him, my shoulder brushing his, sending him stumbling back into the dirt. I headed toward the training hall. I had 2 months before the final selection. The Ouyang family was offering massive rewards for the winner, spirit stones, high-grade weapons, and techniques that could change a man's destiny. But I didn't care about the prizes. I cared about survival. I met my second senior brother, Song Jida, near the weapon racks. He looked at me with a complicated expression. He knew I was dangerous, but he also knew the sect was about to become a war zone. Li Qingshan won't stop until you're dead, Lin Yuan, Song Jida warned, his voice low. He's already contacted the Long family. They're sending a professional. I gripped the hilt of a practice sword, my knuckles turning white. Let them send whoever they want. I've died once already. I'm not planning on doing it again. I spent the rest of the day in the gravity chamber, pushing my King Kong punch to the absolute limit. Every strike felt like thunder. Every breath felt like fire. I could feel the system inside me vibrating, pushing my physical stats past the 2000 mark. I was becoming something more than human. As the sun set, I looked out over the Qingyan sect. The lights were flickering in the distance, peaceful and calm. But I knew the truth. Underneath that peace was a den of vipers. Li Qingshan, the Ouyang family, and the hidden killers, they were all waiting for me to blink. I wouldn't blink. I would be the one to draw first blood. If they wanted a monster, I would give them a nightmare they could never wake up from. The path ahead was stained red, and I was ready to walk it until the very end. I was 16 years old, and the world was changing faster than I could blink. I looked at the old woman, then back at the testing stone. People were leaving, the crowd thinning out. Li Qingshan and his crew were gone. They didn't seem to care about the high-stakes drama they had just stirred up. My younger sisters were there, too. They looked at me with wide, worried eyes. They knew something was wrong. Even as a disciple of a sect this large, the internal politics were suffocating. There were 24 of us in the inner circle, all training for the same peak. We were in the same realm, but after my recent breakthroughs, the fights that used to be hard felt easy. Too easy. But facing hundreds, even thousands, of elite sect members was a different story. I had spent what felt like 20,000 years in my mind, refining my techniques and pushing through the limits of life and death. I was a new man, but I still had to prove it. Suddenly, the air shifted. I saw her, Ouyang Yan. She was sitting atop a white crane, looking down at everyone with that cold, distant gaze. She didn't say a word, but her presence alone was enough to make people tremble. If anyone made a mistake now, the Ouyang family would erase them in a heartbeat. I looked deep into the distance, my mind racing. I remembered Sun Wukong, the legendary figure my techniques were modeled after. I wouldn't be held back. I walked through the sect grounds, feeling the weight of the stairs. I saw a young man, barely 20, looking at me with pure disdain. "What are you doing here, Lin Yuan?" he sneered. To people like him, I was still the trash from the bottom of the mountain. They always looked down on me. "Third brother." A voice called out. I turned and saw a young girl running toward me. It was Xiao Meng. Her eyes were red. She had been crying. "What happened?" I asked, my voice dropping an octave. "Someone hit Sister Yan," she sobbed. "They treated her like a dead dog. They were so mean." My blood boiled. I saw Li Qingshan in the distance, laughing with a group of disciples. Among them was a man with a heavy, dark aura, Ziyang, the saint of the demon race. He was a genius, a monster in human skin. He and Bai Feiyu were the two sons of this generation, and they were finally meeting face to face. Ziyang frowned, his eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on me. He was a natural talent, a warrior who had been fighting since he was 3 years old. He didn't see a person when he looked at me. He saw an obstacle. Xiao Meng grabbed my sleeve, her small hands shaking. The bad man came, and Sister Yin told us to hide. Then she came back, and she wouldn't stop crying. "She's so angry, third brother. She told us to stay away from you." I let out a long breath. The Ouyang family was trying to isolate me. They wanted to break my spirit before the competition even started. They were high and mighty, living in their palaces, while I was down here in the dirt. But they forgot one thing. The dirt is where you bury people. I found myself near the martial arts hall. A group of older warriors, men in their 30s and 40s, were practicing. They were strong, but their potential had peaked. I knew that within 10 years, I would surpass them all. I would be the one they feared. I stepped out of the hall and looked up at the sky. I could feel the heavenly Tao vibrating around me. It was an ancient, suffocating power. I made a silent vow, a blood oath that resonated with the very stars. I didn't care about the Ouyang family's prestige or Li Qingshan's schemes. I would protect Xiao Hai and Xiao Meng, even if I had to burn this sect to the ground. "Lin Yuan, you're late," a voice boomed. It was one of the elders, his face full of arrogance. "The competition begins soon. If you can't even show up on time, how do you expect to survive?" I didn't answer him. I just felt the power of the King Kong punch surging through my veins. The sun was rising over the Yangtze River in my mind, a silent, powerful force. I was ready. I didn't need their permission to be strong. I was going to take everything they thought belonged to them. The path was set, the oath was sworn, and tomorrow, the world would finally see who I really was. I could feel the heavy gaze of the warriors around me. Among them was Wan Keshan, a man whose presence usually demanded respect, but today, The air felt different. These men lived by the laws of the heavenly Tao, yet as they looked at me, their faces twisted into masks of disbelief and irritation. They couldn't understand how someone like me, a man they considered a distraction, could stand among them. I ignored their glares. My mind was focused on the internal rhythm of my own strength. I had spent years in this body, a body they mocked, but I knew its true potential. I was 36 years old, an age where most warriors believed their path was already set in stone. They looked at me as if I were a relic, a man who had missed his chance. Some even joked that I had lived 10,000 years already because of how slow my progress seemed to them. But they didn't see the army of power growing within my flesh. The sun began to rise, casting long shadows over the training grounds. I watched a group of young recruits, barely 22, moving with a grace they hadn't earned. I looked at them the way a general looks at soldiers who haven't yet tasted blood. They were flashy, but they were hollow. Song Kang's family and the Ouyang clan were still pulling the strings from the shadows. They thought they had me figured out. They believed that because I was 36, I was finished. But I had a secret they couldn't grasp, a system, a digital interface in my mind that tracked my every growth. While they relied on ancient scrolls and fading lineages, I relied on absolute, measurable progress. Li Qingshan was still watching me, his eyes full of a dark, lingering resentment. He had become a shadow of himself, obsessed with the power I had displayed at the testing pillar. I knew he was waiting for me to fail. He wanted to see me drop my sword, to see my body break under the pressure of the upcoming competition. He thought I was cunning, a snake hiding in the grass, but I was something much more dangerous. Lin Yuan, you're just wasting your time, a voice sneered. It was Lu Changxi. He pointed a finger at me, his face full of arrogance. He didn't realize that I could see right through him. I didn't say a word. I just raised my hand and pointed back. The silence between us was louder than any insult he could hurl. Behind him stood Bai Feiyu, the hidden genius. He was watching me intensely, trying to decode the moves I hadn't even made yet. He knew something the others didn't. He knew that the Liu family's sea-crossing spear technique, which they prized so highly, was nothing compared to what I was brewing. As the day grew colder, I saw old Liang approaching from the distance. He had been busy, running through the city to buy medicinal pills for me, trying to bolster my strength before the big day. Even Sun Wuji was there, acting like a loyal son, though I knew his heart was full of schemes. They were all preparing for a storm, but they didn't realize I was the one bringing it. 1 month, I whispered to myself. In 1 month, the sect gates will open for the grand competition. If I couldn't seize this chance, I would remain a footnote in their history. But my internal power had already reached a staggering level. My aura extended 35 meters around me, a silent zone of death that no ordinary warrior could penetrate. I wasn't just a martial artist anymore. I was becoming a force of nature. Sun Wuji tried to act superior, claiming he was only here to deliver a message from his father. He mocked my lack of formal entry into the higher ranks. You haven't even crossed the threshold, he laughed. Where do you get the nerve to stand here? I didn't lose my temper. I just looked at him with pity. He thought he was the master of his own fate, but he was just a puppet. I was done playing their games. I was done seeking their permission. I turned away from them and began to practice. I moved through the forms of the King Kong punch, then transitioned into the Liu family's spear techniques, refining them, making them my own. I did it 3 times in a row, each strike faster and more violent than the last. Ouyang Yin watched me from the sidelines, her expression unreadable. Li Qingshan looked like he wanted to vomit from pure jealousy. They saw a man who shouldn't be strong suddenly commanding the very air around him. I felt the blood surging in my chest, hot and demanding. Within 7 days, I would show them what real teaching looked like. I would show them that a waist at 36 could bridge the gap that thousands of years of tradition couldn't. The Ouyang family, the traitors in the army, the jealous disciples, they were all just fuel for the fire I was about to light. I breathed in the cold morning air, my heart steady. The time for hiding was over. I looked at Sun Fei, my eyes half closed. He was talking, but I wasn't really listening to his arrogance. I could feel the power of the King Kong punch vibrating in my bones. I had spent 8 years in this sect being treated like dirt, but that time was over. I looked at Xiao Hai and Xiao Meng. They were the only reason I stayed, the only ones I truly cared to protect. Sun Fei kept mocking me, but his words were just empty noise. I had already decided my path. I was going to use my life, my very teaching, to show them what a real warrior looked like. In this world of cultivation, if they wouldn't give me a place to stand, I would carve one out with my fists. Later that day, I met with Chen Chongsheng. We spoke about the upcoming martial assembly. The Ouyang family and the military leaders were all watching. They expected a show, but they didn't know I was the one holding the script. I wasn't just planning to participate, I was planning to dominate. I spent the afternoon at the testing grounds near the mountain. The air was thick with the scent of pine and old stone. I didn't want to just practice. I wanted to push the limits of the golden plate technique I had recently unlocked. The sect master had hinted that the path of heaven was like a bridge, and I was ready to cross it. As I walked back, I ran into Zhao Qingfeng and his group. They were talking about hunting demonic beasts to earn money and prestige. They looked at me with disdain, as if I were a bug they could crush. Zhao Qingfeng laughed, challenging me to join the hunt. He thought I was afraid. He thought I would shrink back like the old Lin Yuan. "Are you afraid you'll lose your life before the monthly exam?" he sneered. I didn't blink. I told him I would be there. The value of a man isn't found in his words, but in his results. If they wanted a hunt, I would give them one they would never forget. I returned to my small courtyard at the Qingyan sect. I saw old Kai sitting there, his back hunched over a bowl of tea. He looked up at me, his eyes full of worry. He had seen too many talented men fall to pride, and he didn't want me to be next. But I wasn't driven by pride. I was driven by survival. I went inside and saw Xiao Hai practicing his horse stance. He was sweating, his legs trembling, but he didn't stop. He looked up and smiled when he saw me. "Dad, you're back," he whispered, trying to keep his form. I felt a pang in my chest. Even if the world turned against me, I had to be the mountain that shielded him. I sat down and began to guide him, correcting his posture. I told him that cultivation wasn't just about strength. It was about persistence. It was about holding on when everyone else told you to let go. I felt a sudden shift in the air. My connection to the system pulsed. I had gained a new insight from my time in the martial space. I reached out and touched the air, feeling the flow of energy. I wasn't just a waste anymore. I was a storm waiting to break. The Ouyang family, the sect, the enemies hiding in the shadows, they were all about to find out exactly who I was. I watched the figure disappear into the main hall, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. The 3,000 yuan I had just spent felt like a distant memory, but I knew it wasn't just about the money. It was about the intent behind it. To the world, it was just a transaction, but to me, it was a declaration. I stood there, my gaze falling on the test platform where the number 50 was etched clearly. I could feel the eyes of the sect members on me. Some were filled with suspicion, others with a strange kind of respect. They were starting to realize that the waste they once knew was gone. I spent the next few hours navigating the internal politics of the sect. Li Qingshan was still lurking, his heart full of calculation. I could see it in his eyes. He was waiting for me to fail, waiting for a moment of weakness to strike. But I wasn't the same man who would shrink away. Back at my quarters, I checked on Xiao Hai. The boy was growing stronger every day, his small face set with a determination that mirrored my own. I felt a heavy responsibility on my shoulders. As his senior, as his protector, I had to be the one to guide him back to the true path of the sect. For years, the tension between the Ouyang family and the rest of us had been building like a storm, and I was now standing right in the center of it. I met with old Kai later that evening. He pulled me aside for a private talk, his voice low and urgent. He warned me about Li Qingshan and the others, telling me that the stakes were higher than I realized. These internal techniques and secret scrolls weren't just pieces of paper. They were the lifeblood of the sect's power. If I wasn't careful, 30 years of tradition would come crashing down on my head. I spent the night in my room, the silence of the ancestral courtyard wrapping around me. I pulled out my bag and looked at the items I had gathered. Every pill, every scroll, was a tool for survival. I knew the monthly exam was coming, and the air was already thick with anticipation. The villagers and the lower disciples were all whispering about the sudden rise of a dark horse. The next morning, the sun broke over the mountain ridges, casting long shadows across the training grounds. I saw Su Guoming and Chun Rieo standing near the entrance, their faces grim. They knew that today wasn't just another day of practice. It was a test of blood. I looked at Xiao Hai one last time before heading out. He nodded at me, a silent understanding passing between us. As I walked toward the central peak, I felt a sudden surge of power. My cultivation had reached a tipping point. I wasn't just at the bone-breaking stage anymore. I was pushing against the very limits of what a disciple at my level should be capable of. I saw Ouyang Yin in the distance, surrounded by his usual crowd of followers. He looked at me, his eyes narrowing. He still thought he could control the narrative. "Lin Yuan," he called out, his voice carrying across the courtyard. "You've caused quite a stir lately. Don't think a few lucky breaks make you a master." I didn't answer him with words. I just kept walking, my footsteps steady on the stone path. I knew that in a few hours, the talking would stop and the fighting would begin. The Qingyun sect was a place where only the strong survived, and I had no intention of being the one who fell. I was ready to show them exactly what a waste could do when pushed to the edge. I climbed the winding path toward the summit of Qingyun Peak, my every step echoing with a new sense of purpose. The arrogance of the elite disciples hung in the air like a foul mist. I saw Li Chungyao and Zhao Fuzhu standing near the testing area, their eyes filled with a familiar, cold disdain. They were the ones who had always looked down on me, treating my existence like a stain on the sect's reputation. Li Chungyao stepped forward, his posture radiating a confidence he hadn't earned. He had always been Ouyang Yan's most loyal shadow, a genius in his own right who lived to serve the Ouyang family's interests. I ignored their whispers and focused on the massive iron frames and heavy spears set up for the trial. These weren't ordinary weapons. They were forged from deep-sea ice and heavy iron, designed to crush the spirit of anyone who wasn't strong enough. Su Hong stood nearby, her expression unreadable as she watched the disciple struggle. She was a member of the Sun family, a powerhouse that even the Ouyang clan had to respect. She looked at me, perhaps sensing the change in my aura, but I kept my gaze fixed ahead. Ouyang Yin finally made his appearance, surrounded by a wall of followers who acted as his personal shield. He didn't say a word, but the murderous intent in his eyes spoke volumes. He gestured toward the testing pillars, and a thin, withered man stepped out from the shadows. This man was a hidden master of the sect, his presence so suppressed that he felt like a ghost. He placed two massive ice spears onto the rack, each weighing tens of thousands of pounds. The ground groaned under the weight. Li Chungyao laughed, a sharp, grating sound that cut through the tension. He challenged me to step up, convinced that my recent breakthroughs were nothing more than a fluke. I didn't hesitate. I walked toward the spears, feeling the biting cold radiate from the enchanted ice. The crowd drew a collective breath, expecting to see me crushed under the pressure. I reached out and gripped the freezing metal, my muscles coiling like steel springs. I didn't just lift the spears. I channeled the full force of my bone-breaking stage power into my grip. The sound of cracking ice filled the courtyard, sharp as a whip crack. With a sudden burst of strength, I hoisted the massive weights above my head. The iron frame beneath my feet buckled, and the stone tiles shattered into dust. I saw the color drain from Li Qingyao's face. He stumbled back, his arrogance replaced by a raw, naked fear. Apparently, a high-ranking disciple had recently slain one, bringing back its massive head as a trophy. The crowd shifted their focus to a group of disciples arriving from the inner gate, led by a tall, arrogant man carrying a heavy sword. This was the elite. They didn't look at us as fellow disciples. They looked at us like insects. One of them, a man with a cold sneer, stepped forward and mocked the struggle we had just endured. He claimed that lifting spears was child's play compared to the true trials of the mountain. He spoke of the Holy Sun, selection, and how only those with the blood of heroes could ever hope to stand on the 7 pillars of greatness. I watched them closely. My system hummed in the back of my mind, calculating the gap between us. These people had resources I could only dream of, silk robes worth thousands of gold coins, and weapons forged from rare ores. But they lacked one thing, the desperation of someone who had crawled back from the brink of death. Ouyang Yin stepped toward the newcomers, his demeanor changing instantly from a predator to a respectful subordinate. He pointed at me, whispering something to the man with the heavy sword. The man's eyes locked onto mine. He didn't see a threat. He saw a bug that needed to be stepped on. He laughed, a deep, booming sound that shook the air. He told me that if I wanted to prove myself, I should try to survive the upcoming hunt in the Black Jade Valley. I didn't back down. I felt a surge of cold, killing intent. I knew that the hunt was just a cover for them to finish me off away from prying eyes. They wanted to lead me into the depths of the mountain where the monsters were thick and the terrain was lethal. Beside me, Xiao Ming gripped my sleeve, her small hands shaking. I placed a hand on her shoulder, silently promising her that no one would hurt her. I looked back at the inner gate disciples and the arrogant Ouyang Yin. They thought they were the hunters, but they didn't realize I was already familiar with the shadows. I turned and walked toward the back hall of the sect, ignoring their insults. The system alerted me that my bone-breaking power was stabilizing, but I needed more materials to reach the next level. I needed the core of a beast, something like the black jade python they were so proud of. If they wanted a hunt, I would give them one. I would enter that valley, not as a target, but as the apex predator they never saw coming. The path ahead was stained with blood, but for the first time, it wasn't mine. I kept digging until I unearthed a hidden cache. It was staggering. I estimated the value at nearly 100 billion. My heart raced as I pushed forward, the power within me surging. Dozens of fierce warriors had fallen in the chaos, and only a few remained. Su Hong looked at me, her eyes filled with a desperate hope to turn the tide of this lonely, bitter struggle. I checked my resources. I had saved up about 4,850,000. Everything was becoming expensive, almost too much to handle. Trouble was brewing, and the air was thick with the scent of a coming storm. I saw the white banners of the propaganda teams everywhere. Every word they spoke, every step they took, was designed to tear down what remained of the old order. The warriors watched, their faces reflecting a mix of sorrow and awe. Among them was an old man I recognized from the day before. He was a man of status, a leader. He looked at me, seeing my clothes stained with the dust of the Long's home mountain foothills. He wasn't afraid. He knew that with the power of the divine punch, one man's hatred could change everything. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. Ouyang Yin and Su Hongdong appeared, followed by Su Zi and the others. These warriors from the Yin Valley were elite, and they didn't take kindly to outsiders. A small, chubby disciple bowed to them. Everyone was armed, their eyes fixed on the Ouyang family. I saw them, the top 3 geniuses, including the one they called Sun Wukong. They were there to pay respects to the great general. This man was a legend, a veteran of 100 battles. He looked at the recruits, his gaze seeing through everyone. When his eyes landed on Su Hongdong, a cold smile flickered on his lips. They were discussing the 9 hidden caves, a secret known only to a few. 4 warriors followed behind, escorting a group of teenagers to the defensive lines of Litian Mountain. The night was falling, and the distant lights looked like flickering embers. I watched the middle-aged commander analyze the battlefield. Chao Helen and Chen Feng were there too, acting like they owned the place. They were arrogant, confident in their victory. The great general wants results, one of them barked. I felt a wave of suspicion. The taxes they were collecting, the pressure they were putting on the local people, it was all a setup. These past few years, I had survived through sheer will. I had faced assassination attempts and outrun killers who wanted my head. My name was already on their blacklists. I saw a young man being dragged by his beard by Ouyang's men. It was Dao Buswang. He was being framed for an assassination he didn't commit. The real killer was a massive brute named Chao Qianming. I didn't hesitate. Within seconds, I gave chase. I caught up to him on the ridge. With one punch, I shattered his defense. My fist slammed into his back with the force of 24 strikes combined. Lin Qingshan had been watching from the shadows, trying to track my movements. But I was too fast. I moved like a ghost between the trees. More and more warriors from the Ouyang and Tai families were arriving, joining the fray near the peak. The officials were cheering, calling for my blood. They claimed that killing a lowborn, like me, was necessary to maintain order. They wanted to wipe out my family, to end the line of Xiao Hai and Xiao Meng. I saw a young man trying to sneak away through the back streets. It was Li Qingshan. He was trying to hide his involvement, but he couldn't escape my sight. I felt the power of the 5 great families pressing down on me. They were united now, a single front dedicated to my destruction. I needed a breakthrough. I needed a pill to stabilize my core. Suhong offered me one, her face pale. I took it, feeling the raw energy coursing through my veins. If we climb this mountain, I told her, we change our fate. I don't care about their rules. I was a martial artist now. If they wanted to rob me, I would rob them back. I didn't care if I was a student from a backwater school or a genius from the city. In this valley, only strength mattered. I watched as Liang Yun was pushed down the slope. It was a trap. The seekers of the Tianyi mirror were ruthless. They killed without hesitation, leaving behind nothing but cold corpses. They were earning their keep through blood. I watched them, my eyes cold. They thought they were fast, but they hadn't seen anything yet. I saw a group of idiots swearing at their own senior brothers, acting like fools. They didn't realize the danger they were in. I watched my senior brother retaliate, his movements precise and deadly. He didn't just kill, he sent a message. Li Qingshan's eyes narrowed as he watched the Ouyang disciples. He could see I was getting faster. Within a minute, I was a blur. The truth was finally coming out. The Luo family, Xie Chouqing, they were all part of this. I looked up at the sky, feeling a strange excitement. This was Dingshan Mountain, the place where legends were born. I reached into my pouch and pulled out the sand-layered charms I had prepared. I fired them at Chao Qing, the projectiles piercing through the air like light. This is the treasure of my ancestors. I shouted. The battle raged until 7 in the morning. One teacher fell, gasping for breath, still trying to claim a name for himself. And there he was, my junior brother, Hu Yun. He looked at me, his eyes wide. He never imagined I would grow this strong, this fast. Suzy raised his hand, signaling a halt. He looked at the offerings, the millions of coins, the sacrifices. If I can't even throw a punch, I said, my voice steady, then I don't deserve to enter the sect. The disciples were whispering. They thought I was finished, but I was just getting started. I wasn't here for money or fame. I was here to survive. I was just practicing. I told them, a smirk playing on my lips. This isn't about business. It's about power. I stood before the gate, refusing to back down. Even if the mountain itself crumbled, I would stand my ground. I understood now. This wasn't just a test. It was a war, and I was the only one ready to win it. I had already made up my mind. From the very first day, I knew this path would be carved in blood and sweat. The sect leaders didn't see the struggle of the Shang family over the last 3 years. They didn't see the desperation. People were starting to get bold, thinking they could walk all over us because they hadn't seen a true master from the Shang family in years. I stood in the Hall of Everlasting Lamps where the life fires of every Qingyun sect disciple flickered. I looked at Huang Xiong and Zhao Zong. They were powerful, sure, but were they better than my second senior brother? I doubted it. I turned to the old caretaker of the lamps, my eyes burning with curiosity. I wanted to see the lamp of the first senior brother. I needed to know what a true peak looked like. Grandpa Shang, just let me see it once, I pleaded, keeping my voice low. Please. He didn't answer right away. The air in the hall felt heavy, thick with the spiritual pressure of 1,000 souls. I realized then that martial arts wasn't just about hitting things. It was about intent. Yi Feng, a name that commanded respect, used his techniques to manipulate the very atmosphere around him. His Golden Mountain strike wasn't just a punch. It was a storm that gathered the energy of heaven and earth. It was a domain of pure power. I watched as the energy around the hall shifted. It felt like a gale force wind was trapped in a small room. This was the level I needed to reach. My own movements were becoming like polished glass, smooth, sharp, and transparent. I was moving beyond the simple forms I had learned. I was starting to see the rhythm of the world. I reached out and touched a piece of glass-like stone near the mountain gate. It felt cold, but I could sense the power humming inside it. It reminded me of the bamboo cotton mountain, a place where the air was always white with mist. I realized that my power wasn't just mine. It was something I had snatched from the jaws of fate. Senior brother, I called out, looking at the flickering lights. I don't care about the rules anymore. I took what I needed. I pulled a small, strange object from my robe. It was a token of my progress, something I had fought to earn. I felt a sudden urge to leave, to head back to the small mountain peak where I felt safe. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the sect grounds. Suddenly, the heavy doors of the hall creaked. Someone was watching. I sensed 30 years of cold resentment behind that movement. It was a shadow from the past. I stood my ground, my fingers twitching toward my weapon. I wasn't the weakling they remembered. If we're meeting for the first time, let's make it memorable, I whispered to the shadows. I saw Su Hong in the distance. Her expression was unreadable, but I didn't care. I had lost my patience for games and politics. Ouyang Yin and the others were gathering their men, preparing for a confrontation they weren't ready for. They thought they could surround me. They thought numbers mattered. Li Ku began lighting the soul lamps one by one. The paper cranes he released flew through the air like spirits, disappearing into the dark corners of the hall. The light revealed the faces of my enemies. Huang Ming was there, his eyes full of malice. He moved toward me, his legs tilling the air like heavy scythes. I didn't blink. I reached for the broken flag behind me. It was a simple tool, but in my hands, it was a weapon of the gods. I saw Su Hong's eyes widen as I stepped forward. I told you I wouldn't let you go, I said, my voice echoing off the stone walls. The fear in the room was palpable. They saw the crates of offerings I had brought, the symbols of my rise. I had gone from a commoner to a threat in the blink of an eye. Even the Empress couldn't ignore the shift in power now. The shadows were closing in, but I was the one holding the flame. This wasn't just a test anymore. It was the beginning of my reign. I watched as Ouyang stepped forward, carrying a heavy box that seemed to groan under its own weight. The crowd murmured, wondering what the waste of the family was bringing this time. Li Shimin looked on, his expression shifting from mockery to genuine confusion. They thought I was coming to beg or show off some useless trinket. They were wrong. I opened the lid, and the air in the hall grew heavy. Inside weren't just simple offerings. There were trophies, remnants of fierce beasts I had slaughtered. I saw Li Ku's eyes dart toward me, his confidence wavering. He had been so sure of himself, so ready to see me fail. But as I pulled out the materials, the atmosphere shifted. I had over 1,000 strands of true chi swirling within me now, a hidden ocean of power that none of them could sense. I caught Su Hong watching me from the corner of my eye. She looked stunned. She knew what it meant to bring back the parts of a first-grade fierce beast, but she didn't know the half of it. I hadn't just killed one. I had cleared out an entire pack. I remembered the way the iron-clad beasts had charged at me, their roars shaking the very earth, and how I had cut them down one by one. I told you I wouldn't let it go, I muttered, mostly to myself. The staff at the settlement desk began to process my haul. Their hands trembled as they tallied the points. 33,000. Then more. The numbers kept climbing until they hit a staggering total. A few gold coins wouldn't cut it anymore. I was looking at tens of thousands in rewards. The onlookers went silent. The commoner they despised had just outperformed the geniuses of the sect in a single night. I received a message from Su Linger. She told me she was stuck with the people from Qingyun Peak, forced to handle the logistics for the upcoming Great Sect tournament. She sounded frustrated, wishing she could be by my side to see the looks on their faces. I smiled grimly. He couldn't wrap his head around what he was seeing. You did this alone? He stammered. I didn't bother answering. The pile of black jade python scales and beast cores spoke for itself. The settlement officer whispered the total, and the number echoed through the silent hall. 23,000. It was a fortune that most disciples couldn't earn in a decade. I watched Li Qingshan's face turn from pale to a sickly shade of green. He had spent his whole life looking down on me, calling me a waste. Now, he couldn't even find the breath to insult me. I turned my gaze toward Ouyang Yin. She was watching me from the crowd, her expression unreadable. For the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes. She realized the hierarchy she relied on was crumbling. I took my rewards and walked toward the exit. My footsteps were heavy and deliberate. Every person I passed moved out of my way. They didn't just see a fellow disciple anymore. They saw a predator. I thought about the technique Elder Kong had passed to me. It was the foundation of my power, a secret that was finally bearing fruit. I wasn't just a participant in the upcoming tournament. I was the storm that was about to break over the Qingyun sect. As I stepped outside, the air felt different. News was filtering in from the outside world about Chang'an County. Thousands of refugees were fleeing toward the sect, displaced by some unknown terror. The world was becoming a meat grinder. I realized then that my strength wasn't just for pride or revenge. It was for survival. If I stayed weak, I would end up like those refugees, broken and forgotten. I spotted Bai Fei Yu in the distance. He was the golden boy, the genius everyone worshipped. He was practicing a sword strike, a single move that seemed to cut the very air. Most people would have been intimidated. I just watched, memorizing his rhythm. He was fast, but I was different now. I had survived the mountains and tempered my body in blood. I felt a surge of energy in my chest. My cultivation was peaking, pushing against the barriers of the bone-breaking stage. I was 18 years old, the age where most martial artists hit their limit. But for me, this was just the beginning. I looked at my hands, still scarred from the fight with the python. I wasn't the man I used to be. I was something harder, something colder. The Ouyang family was still plotting, I knew that. They wouldn't let their waste become a master without a fight. But they didn't realize I was already miles ahead of them. I had the resources, the technique, and the will to kill. Let them come. Let them try to take what I had built. I would show them exactly what happens when you push a man with nothing to lose. The tournament was coming, and I was ready to paint the arena red. My muscles felt like they were being torn apart and stitched back together. I had just broken through the latest barrier of the bone-breaking stage, and the blood was rushing through my veins like a torrential river. Every breath I took felt heavy, charged with a new, violent energy. I looked at my reflection in a puddle and barely recognized the man staring back. I was 18, but my eyes held the coldness of someone who had lived 1,000 lives. I spent my days on the mountain, carrying massive logs that would have crushed an ordinary man. To the passing disciples, I looked like a common laborer, a fallen genius reduced to manual work. Li Qingshan watched me from a distance, his face twisted with a mix of confusion and hidden malice. Beside him, a little girl watched with wide eyes. They didn't understand that every step I took with that weight on my shoulders was forging my body into a weapon. I needed more than just physical strength. I needed resources. I began hunting the Xian Shi, those cunning, venomous beasts that lurked in the dark corners of the forest. Their meat was tough and bitter, but it was packed with the raw essence I required to fuel my transformations. I ate like a predator, fueling the fire in my gut. I was building a fortress out of my own flesh, layer by agonizing layer. The Ouyang family was still keeping tabs on me. I knew their spies were everywhere, reporting back to the elders who had already written me off as trash. They thought they knew my limits. They thought I was just a lingering ghost of a dead reputation. They were wrong. I walked into the outer sect resource hall to claim my monthly allowance. The air was stale, smelling of old scrolls and indifference. The official behind the counter, a man who had seen 1,000 disciples come and go, didn't even bother to look up. He saw my name, the waste of the Ouyang family, and tossed a small bag of supplies toward me with a sneer. He treated me like a beggar. I didn't say a word. I just took the bag and felt the system interface flicker in my mind. My points surged, jumping from 23 to 26.5 in a heartbeat. A wave of ice-cold energy flooded my brain, followed by a searing heat that settled in my waist. I was growing stronger by the second. As I left the hall, I ran straight into a group of Ouyang family disciples. They were dressed in pristine robes, their faces glowing with the arrogance of the well-fed. They stopped when they saw me, their laughter dying down into mocking grins. One of them stepped forward, looking at the heavy logs I still carried on my shoulders. He laughed, a high, grating sound. He told me I was a disgrace, a stain on the family name that should have been erased years ago. I looked at him, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his stance and the fear hidden behind his bravado. I could have killed him right there. I could have dropped the log and shattered his chest before he even drew his breath. But I held back. It wasn't time yet. I walked past them, my shoulder brushing against his. He stumbled, his eyes widening in shock at the sheer solidity of my frame. He felt like he had just bumped into a mountain. I didn't look back. I had a tournament to prepare for and a family to dismantle. They thought they were the masters of this world, but I was the one rewriting the rules. The path ahead was covered in blood, and I was more than ready to walk it. I walked toward the training grounds, where the air was thick with the scent of sweat and burning energy. The atmosphere was electric. Two disciples, Chun Yang and Jing Yang, were leaning against each other near the entrance, looking exhausted. They had just finished their strength tests. One had scored a 994, while the other hit 1003. They looked like they had been through a war, their clothes torn and their breathing ragged. As soon as they saw me, their weary eyes lit up with excitement. They scrambled to their feet, stumbling toward me like they had found a savior. Before I could say a word, a small, energetic figure burst through the crowd. It was Xiao Tai, only 8 years old but full of fire. He threw himself at me, wrapping his arms around my waist in a tight hug. "Third brother, I missed you so much," he shouted, his voice echoing across the courtyard. I looked down at him and smiled. Behind him, Xiao Meng and Xiao Hai approached, their faces filled with a mix of relief and admiration. They told me how the other senior brothers, especially the fourth brother, refused to play with them or teach them anything. They were always too busy with their own cultivation. I felt a pang of anger in my chest. These kids were family, yet they were treated like burdens. "Don't worry," I said, ruffling Xiao Tai's hair. "I'm here now." I pulled out a small gift I had prepared for them, a set of carved wooden toys that I had infused with a tiny bit of my internal energy. Xiao Tai's eyes widened as he took the gift. He could feel the warmth radiating from the wood. To an ordinary person, it was a trinket. To a martial artist, it was a sign of incredible control. Suddenly, a group of middle-aged outer sect martial artists pushed through the crowd. They were led by a man with a scarred face who looked like he had seen too many battles. He looked at me with disdain, his eyes lingering on my simple robes. He was here for the official martial arts assessment, a gatekeeper for those trying to enter the inner sect. "What is this?" the scarred man sneered, pointing at me. "Is the Ouyang family so desperate that they're sending children and beggars to the exam?" The crowd went silent. Many of the younger disciples looked away, afraid of the man's aura. But I didn't flinch. I walked straight toward the testing stone, the heavy ironwood pillar that stood in the center of the square. "I'm here to register," I said calmly. The man laughed, a harsh, dry sound. He told me I was wasting everyone's time. He claimed that a waste like me didn't even have the right to stand in the shadow of the pillar. He tried to block my path, his hand reaching out to shove me back. I didn't wait for him to touch me. I moved. It was a single, fluid motion, a simple punch that looked like it had no weight behind it. My fist connected with his chest before he could even blink. There was no loud explosion, just a dull thud. The man flew backward, his feet leaving the ground as he crashed into a group of his followers. The silence that followed was deafening. The other middle-aged warriors stared at their leader, who was gasping for air on the ground. They looked at me, then at the testing stone. I stepped up to the pillar. I didn't use the King Kong punch. I didn't use any flashy techniques. I just struck the stone with a straight lead. The surface of the ironwood groaned. The runes carved into the base began to glow, climbing higher and higher. It passed 1,000, then 1,500, and finally settled at a staggering number that made the proctor's jaw drop. 21. Someone whispered. They weren't talking about the score, but my age. To have that kind of power at my age was unheard of in the outer sect. I turned to Xiao Tai and the others. They were beaming with pride. I saw the envy in the eyes of the other disciples, but I also saw fear. Good. Let them be afraid. Just then, a man named Yang Fei stepped forward from the shadows of the main hall. He was a senior figure, someone who had always looked down on me. He held a bag of coins in his hand, tossing it toward me with a fake smile. He tried to act like he was being generous, telling the crowd that he was rewarding my sudden improvement. "Take it, Xiao Feng," Yang Fei said, his voice dripping with condescension. "You'll need it for medicine after the tournament." I caught the bag midair. I knew what he was doing. He was trying to mark me, to make it look like I was under his thumb. Xiao Hai stepped forward, looking worried, but I signaled for him to stay back. "Thank you, senior," I said, my voice cold. I knew the path ahead was going to be covered in blood. The Ouyang family was starting to realize I was a threat, and men like Yang Fei wouldn't sit idly by. But as I looked at the system interface in my mind, seeing my power levels continue to rise, I knew one thing for certain. They weren't ready for what was coming. I wasn't just a participant in their tournament. I was the one who was going to burn it all down. I stood on the stage, the heavy scent of sweat and shock hanging in the air. Li Jiangming charged at me, his blade whistling through the air with a desperate, frantic energy. He was fast, but to my eyes, he was moving through water. I didn't reach for a weapon. I didn't need one. I raised my fist, channeling every ounce of the King Kong punch into my knuckles. One strike. That was all it took. The collision sounded like a crack of thunder. My fist met his defense, shattering his momentum and sending a shockwave through his entire frame. Li Jiangming's spine buckled. He collapsed, his arrogance extinguished in an instant. I stood over him, my breathing steady, while the crowd fell into a deathly silence. The proctor swallowed hard, his eyes darting between me and the broken genius on the floor. I looked at my hands. For 5 years, I had been the joke of this sect. I had been the one people stepped over. Now, I felt a power so raw it bordered on the divine. This wasn't just martial arts. This was something deeper, something inherited from a lineage they couldn't possibly understand. He's a monster, someone whispered. I ignored them and turned toward the shadows where Yang Fei was watching. His fake smile was gone. He looked like he had seen a ghost. He had spent years calculating, plotting, and treating me like a pawn. But his calculations were wrong. He thought he could measure my growth, but my potential was limitless. Suddenly, the atmosphere shifted. 5 figures in black robes appeared at the edge of the arena. They didn't move like students. They moved like killers. Their presence felt like a cold blade against the neck. I could feel the killing intent radiating from them, sharp and focused. They weren't here for the tournament. They were here for me. I felt a pang of worry for Xiao Hai and Xiao Ming, but I pushed it down. If I wavered now, we were all dead. I closed my eyes for a second, checking the system interface. My power levels were still climbing, the numbers flickering red in my mind. 3,004 points. It was an absurd number for someone at my level. One of the black-clad men stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of a long, jagged sword. He didn't say a word, but the air around him began to distort. This was a real threat, a level of power that made Li Jiangming look like a child playing with sticks. Who sent you? I asked, my voice echoing in the silent hall. They didn't answer. They didn't need to. In this world, strength was the only language that mattered, and they were here to silence mine. I planted my feet, feeling the energy from the earth rise through my boots. My internal gates were wide open. I didn't wait for them to make the first move. I vanished from the center of the ring, leaving only a cracked floor behind. If they wanted a monster, I would show them one. The path forward was stained with blood, and I was ready to walk it. I lunged toward the lead assassin, my fist glowing with a terrifying, golden light. The real fight was just beginning. I didn't step onto that stage just for myself. I did it for my sister-in-law, for everyone who had watched me struggle through years of ignorance and hard work. The tide was turning. They were finally going to see me for who I really was. Not the failure they remembered, but a young man who had shed blood and tears to stand at the top. I was fighting a heated battle against fate itself. Su Shulan had brought 20,000 troops from the wealthy districts just to defend her position, but no one saw the trap Li Qingshan was setting. His gaze was cold, fixed on me like I was a target. I could feel the weight of his envy. To him, I was just a hurdle to overcome, but to me, he was just another test of my will. Why did you come here personally? I muttered. A woman approached me, her presence commanding and sharp. It was the president of the New City branch of the 5 great associations. She looked at me with a mix of curiosity and calculation. I am the president, she said, her voice smooth but firm. I've heard the rumors about a new talent in the outer matches. Xiaofeng, is it? I didn't answer immediately. I had finally reached the edge of this high-stakes game. This woman was powerful, likely at a level I couldn't yet grasp, but she was talking to me like an equal, or at least, a person of interest. She mentioned friendship and connections, but I knew the truth. In a few days, when the Real fighting started, talent would be the only thing that mattered. I believe in you, third brother, a voice called out. It was Xiao Ming. The crowd was buzzing. They saw my potential, the 5 registered items on my profile, and the interest from the association president. I looked like a high school kid to them, someone who should be sitting in a classroom, not standing in a ring of fire. But I wasn't just any student. Old Li Chengran had been holding out on me. He told everyone there were only 2 ordinary candidates this year, but he was hiding my true progress. He knew that the Heaven Alliance couldn't keep a lid on me forever. Luck is part of the game, Li Qingshan whispered nearby, his voice dripping with venom. I ignored him. I knew what I had to do. I had been studying the dragon wing technique, learning how to absorb the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. Not all energy is created equal. Different guidance techniques allow you to filter that energy into specific attributes. I practiced the Heaven's Eye technique. I thought, feeling the warmth in my veins. It draws in fire-based energy. It doesn't just strengthen my body, it turns my attacks into literal flames. The tournament arena was a maze of private rooms and training halls. In one of the rooms, I saw a flicker of movement. Someone was watching. Someone was smiling. I recognized the scent in the air, spirit incense. It was a tool used to gauge spiritual compatibility. Suddenly, the air exploded. A pillar of fire erupted from the center of the hall, swirling around Ouyang Yin. She wasn't just absorbing energy, she was becoming it. The heat was suffocating. Every floor of the inn seemed to tremble under the pressure of her spiritual roots. Is she really just doing this for the energy? I wondered, shielding my eyes. She let out a breath, and a column of fire shot forward like a sword, incinerating everything in its path. It was a display of pure, raw power. People were screaming, running for the exits, but I stayed put. I needed to see this. I needed to know what I was up against. "Boss, we have to go," someone yelled, but I didn't move. To achieve that level of external release wasn't easy. Most people could only wrap a thin layer of energy around their fists. But Ouyang? She was a monster. She and the others from the prestigious families had golden-grade potential. I looked at the 7 crystal balls placed on the testing altar. Each one represented a different elemental attribute. When you placed your hand on one, it would light up. The more the color filled the sphere, the higher your compatibility. My compatibility with the Heaven's Eye technique is about 80%, I calculated. I watched as another student stepped up. The crystal glowed, filling up to 85%. He looked smug, like he had already won. But he didn't understand. Having a special constitution meant you could fight across levels like it was nothing. I had spent 5 years grinding, day after day, while these geniuses relied on their bloodlines. They thought they were the masters of this landscape. They thought I couldn't afford to play their game. I walked toward the crystals. I didn't need a fancy family name or a mountain of gold. I just needed to show them that my fire burned hotter than theirs. I reached out my hand, ready to see exactly how much of this world I was destined to consume. The system I carried was a cheat code, plain and simple. While others spent decades meditating, I was accumulating power by the second. I looked at the crowd. Most of these people were just fodder for the upcoming competition. They didn't know that I had already reached the peak of the bone-breaking stage. I turned my attention back to the testing altar. I needed to find a technique that matched my energy. The Heaven's Eye technique was good, but I knew I could do better. If I didn't find a perfect fit, I'd be wasting my potential. Suddenly, a young girl from the crowd was pushed forward. It was Xiaoming. She looked terrified, her small hands trembling as she approached the crystal balls. One of the older disciples, a guy with a nasty scar on his face, laughed. He wanted to see her fail. He wanted to humiliate anyone associated with me. "Go on, little brat," he sneered. "Show us how useless your family really is." I felt a surge of rage, but I held it back. I watched as Xiaoming reached out and touched the crystal. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the sphere erupted. A blinding white light filled the hall. It wasn't just a glow, it was a roar of energy. The crowd went silent. The crystal ball didn't just fill up, it began to vibrate, cracks spiderwebbing across its surface. The elders leaned forward, their eyes wide. This was unheard of. 100% compatibility, someone whispered. I felt a chill run down my spine. Xiaoming had a special constitution. She was a natural. But in a place like the Qingyun sect, talent like that was a death sentence if you couldn't protect it. The greedy looks on the faces of the Ouyang family members told me everything I needed to know. They didn't see a gifted child, they saw a tool to be claimed. I stepped forward, moving between Xiaoming and the crowd. My shadow fell over her, shielding her from their predatory eyes. "Back off," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that made the nearest disciples flinch. Ouyang Yin stepped into the light, her expression unreadable. She looked at me, then at the shattered crystal. "Lin Yuan, do you realize what this means?" A girl with this level of talent belongs to the inner circle. She belongs to the elite. She belongs to me. I countered. I wasn't going to let them take her. I felt a notification ping in my mind. The system was reacting to my resolve. Main quest updated. Protect the legacy. Reward, 10 million true chi points. 10 million points. That was enough to push me into a realm these people couldn't even dream of. I felt the energy swirling in my dantian, hot and restless. The air in the room grew heavy. It was humid, suffocating, as if the world itself was bracing for an impact. Li Qingshan stepped out from behind Ouyang Yan, a twisted smile on his face. He held a wooden sword, but the aura coming off it was lethal. He was jealous, and jealousy made men stupid. You think you're a hero now, Lin Yuan? He mocked. You're still just a waste who got lucky. Let's see how your luck holds up against real skill. He lunged. His movement was fast, a blur of gray and steel. But to me, he was moving through water. I didn't even draw a weapon. I waited until the tip of his blade was inches from my throat, then I moved. I caught the blade between two fingers. The sound of the impact cracked like a whip. Is that all? I asked. I twisted my wrist, and the wooden sword shattered into 1,000 splinters. I planted a palm in his chest, the King Kong punch, refined by my recent breakthrough. He didn't just fly back. He vanished into the wall of the hall, leaving a human-shaped crater. The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at my hands. The power was intoxicating. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was dominating. I turned to the elders, my eyes burning with a fire they hadn't seen in years. If anyone else wants to test my family's potential, step up. Otherwise, stay out of my way. I grabbed Xiaoming's hand and walked toward the exit. I could feel the eyes on my back, fear, hatred, and curiosity. It didn't matter. The system was humming, my chi was overflowing, and for the first time in 2 lives, I held all the cards. The path ahead was going to be bloody, but I was ready to walk it. I had my system running in the background, quietly accumulating rewards while I moved through the sect. Everything was clicking into place. Ouyang was watching me closely, his movements slow and deliberate as he tried to figure out my next move. He knew I was the one the system had flagged. People were whispering about the Son of Heaven's mandate. In this world, talent like that was supposed to be ancient and rare. They looked at Su Hong and saw a once-in-a-lifetime genius. They saw her as the future of the Qingyan sect. I just saw another obstacle to overcome. The atmosphere was electric. The Great Assembly was approaching, and everyone was obsessed with rankings. The Demon Rat Prince was the center of attention, surrounded by sycophants who wanted to be in his inner circle. He was already projected to be in the top 8. I watched him from the shadows, my fingers twitching. I had to keep my power in check. For now, I had a new task from the system. Find 3 honey leaves hidden on the mountain. Wu Linxian, my master, looked like he was about to have a stroke when he saw me wandering around. He thought I was just flaunting my status instead of training. He didn't understand that every step I took was calculated. Lin Yuan, don't be greedy, Wu Linxian warned, his voice tight. You've only had your breakthrough for 10 days. You can't rush this. Su Hong stepped forward, looking worried. She held out a manual. This is the Heavenly Eye Guidance technique. It's the one I'm most familiar with. Start with this. If it's too hard, we can try the Thunder technique later. She thought she was helping. She thought I would need weeks to grasp the basics. I took the manual and the spirit stone she offered. I didn't tell her that my system was already analyzing the flow of energy. I sat down and opened the book. The others expected me to struggle for hours. I closed my eyes and let the system take over. The chi didn't just move, it surged. It carved a path through my meridians like a lightning bolt. I opened my eyes and stood up. What are you doing? Su Hong asked, blinking in confusion. You just sat down. I'm done, I said. Wu Linxian stumbled toward me, his face pale. Done? It hasn't even been a minute. You're telling me you've already reached the entrance stage. I didn't answer. I could feel the energy humming under my skin, sharper and clearer than before. The shock on their faces was priceless, but I didn't have time to enjoy it. I needed to move. Suddenly, a heavy presence landed at the foot of the mountain. It was my eldest brother, Li Chu. He was a massive man, returning from his travels with a heavy pack. Master, I'm back, he bellowed. He reached into his bag, and pulled out a stack of candied haws. I brought gifts for Tutu. The tension broke as the little girl, Tutu, ran toward him with a cheer. Li Chu laughed, handing out the treats like the world wasn't about to catch fire. He looked at me and nodded, not yet realizing how much had changed since he left. He saw his waist of a junior brother. He didn't see the monster I was becoming. I took a candied haw and bit into it. The sweetness was a sharp contrast to the blood I knew I'd have to spill soon. The game was just beginning. I had 4 days left. The air felt heavy, even as I chewed on the sweet candied haws. I stood in the courtyard of the old mountain peak, watching the others. My talent was no longer a secret, but the suddenness of it all had everyone on edge. Ouyang Sheng stood on the balcony above, looking down at me. For the last half hour, the atmosphere had shifted from playful to deadly serious. My senior brothers and sisters were sizing me up. I wasn't just the waste anymore. I was a problem they didn't know how to solve. Did you really just reach the entrance stage? Suhong asked again. She looked like she wanted to argue with me, but the proof was right there in my breathing. It was pretty simple, I said, shrugging. Wu Linxian stumbled toward me, his face pale from the wine. He looked at me like I was a monster. Simple? Do you know how long it took me? How long it takes anyone? I didn't answer. I didn't care about their records. Suddenly, Li Chu, my eldest brother, turned to Wu Linxian. Hey, how long did it take you to reach the first stage when you started? Wu Linxian took a long swig from his bottle, his eyes glazed. 7 years old, 34 minutes, he muttered. People call me a beast for that. Most geniuses take hours, even days. He looked at me, then back at his bottle. I had done it in less than a minute. In this world, that didn't just make me a genius. It made me a freak. Forget it, Wu Linxian sighed, waving his hand. He looked like he wanted to cry into his wine. Don't tell anyone else it took you a minute. They'll think you're a literal demon. Tutu, the little girl, ran over and wiped some drool from her chin, looking at me with wide eyes. She didn't understand the power levels, but she knew the mood had changed. Brother, she chirped, holding out a strange object. It looked like a metallic helmet covered in intricate carvings. Put this on. I frowned. What is this? It's a device to test mental strength, Suhong explained, her voice dropping to a whisper. Some people are born with high mental power, but it stays dormant. Others are just a few points away from awakening their spiritual sense, but never do. To be a spirit master, you need at least 100 points. I took the helmet. It felt cold. I knew the Ouyang family was watching. I knew Li Yuan represented a threat I couldn't ignore yet. If I wanted to protect Xiao Hai and Xiao Ming, I needed to know exactly where I stood. I put the helmet on. For a second, the world went dark. Then, a surge of energy spiked in my brain. The system inside me hummed, absorbing the scan. Well, Li Chu asked, leaning in. I pulled the helmet off. I didn't tell them the number. If 34 minutes for a cultivation stage made them call me a beast, the number I just saw would make them want to kill me out of fear. Let's go home, I said quietly. As we walked back toward our small house, I looked at the courtyard. This place felt like a sanctuary, but I knew the walls were thin. Ouyang Sheng and the others were already planning the monthly exam. Xiaofeng, Suhong said, catching up to me. The exam is tomorrow. You know that, right? I know. Li Yuanchang will be there, she warned. He's been training in the capital. He's not like the others. He's ruthless. If he sees you as a threat to the Ouyang family's prestige, he won't just try to beat you. He'll try to break you. I thought about the bloody path I had envisioned. I thought about the black-clad swordsman at the pillar and the power coursing through my veins. Let him try, I said. I went to my room and closed the door. I didn't need sleep. I needed to refine the energy. The waste of the Ouyang family was dead. Tomorrow, the rest of the sect would find out exactly what had taken his place. The monthly exam wasn't just a test. It was going to be a massacre. I could see it in their eyes. Even though I was still young and my movements lacked the polish of a seasoned master, there was something else there. A sharpness. A terrifying, innate talent that made them uneasy. I saw Ouyang Sheng nod slowly, his expression heavy with a mix of calculation and dread. He didn't want to believe that my fists actually carried that kind of weight, but the evidence was right in front of him. Li Qingshan stood nearby, his face darkening as he realized the waste he had bullied was gone. Su Hong threw a practice punch into the air, her eyes tracking me. Ouyang Sheng laughed, but it was a hollow, nervous sound. He tried to brush it off, making a joke about how I was just lucky, but I knew better. I had lived through the humiliation. I knew exactly where those fists needed to land to make an impact. As I walked home, the sunset painted the path in shades of blood and gold. Chen Changsun walked beside me, his gaze flickering toward the Ouyang family gates where parents were crowded together, waiting for their children. I didn't want to be one of them anymore, a pawn in their games, a child hiding behind a name. My hands were calloused and ready. I wasn't going to let anyone look down on my family again. Su Hong stayed silent for a long time, her eyes fixed on the ground as we walked. Finally, she looked up. I saw the worry etched into her features. I knew she was thinking about the history books, about the stories of geniuses who rose too fast and burned out even faster. She probably thought I was digging my own grave by showing my strength so early. In my head, I was already planning. I thought about my uncle, about the way he used to patch me up when I came home bruised and broken. That feeling of helplessness, of being a burden to a family that had nothing, was a ghost that still haunted me. I knew Li Chu and the others. I knew this sect. If I didn't have the power to back up my words, everything we loved would be turned to ash. People here didn't just fight. They fought to kill. They fought to erase their rivals. I gripped my fists until my knuckles turned white. Even if this body was once considered trash, I would refine it until it was a weapon. I had to become strong, stronger than anyone imagined. Even if I was an underdog, a defeated one from an old era, I was the one standing now. I was the one who would protect this small house. We reached the courtyard, and the tension finally broke when I saw the kids. "I'm back," I called out. "Brother's back." Xiao Meng and Xiao Hai came rushing out, their small feet thumping against the dirt. Xiao Meng grabbed my left hand, and Xiao Hai hung off my right. I stumbled slightly, laughing as they hung their weight on me. For a moment, the bloodlust and the pressure of the upcoming exam vanished. They didn't care about my cultivation stage or the broken testing pillar. To them, I was just their brother. "Look at you," Chen Changsun muttered, shaking his head at my disheveled state. "You're getting thinner. Are you even eating at the sect?" I chuckled. "I've actually put on some muscle, old man. Don't worry about me." But as I played with the kids, my mind drifted back to the reality of our situation. Su Hong was watching me, her expression unreadable. She knew about the old marriage contracts, the debts, and the enemies lurking in the shadows. She knew that the waste, Xiao Feng, was dead, and in his place was something far more dangerous. I sat down at the table and pulled out a gold storage card, placing it quietly on the wood. The room went silent. 1,000 gold coins. It was a fortune for a family like ours. Li Chu stared at it, his breath hitching. "Where did this come from?" he whispered. "Don't worry about the source," I said, my voice steady. "Use it to take care of the house. Get the medicine Uncle needs. Buy the kids what they want." I didn't tell them about the risks I had taken or the blood I expected to shed tomorrow. I didn't want them to feel the weight of the great emperor path I was walking. In this world, if you don't stir up trouble, trouble finds you anyway. I would rather be the one holding the blade. Su Hong looked at me, her eyes glistening. She knelt down, not in submission, but in a moment of overwhelming relief and gratitude. "You've changed everything," she whispered. I looked at her, then at Chen Changsun, who was trying to hide his own tears. I wasn't just a 17-year-old boy anymore. I was their shield. Later that night, the door to my room creaked open. It was Su Hong. She walked over and gently touched my arm, her fingers tracing the faint bruises from my training. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly. I looked at her, really looked at her. In the moonlight, she didn't look like a fierce cultivator or a worried guardian. She just looked like a girl who had carried too much for too long. "I'm fine," I said. "I've learned the secret techniques. I've mastered the internal strength. Nobody is going to hurt us anymore." I thought about Bai Fei Yu and the black-clad swordsman. I thought about the legends of the ancient warriors who could shatter mountains with a single breath. Tomorrow, at the monthly exam, I wouldn't just be passing a test. I would be announcing my arrival to the world. The thunder was coming, and I was the storm.